Sol 16. Beth sat in Rover 1, transferring her program from her personal laptop to the rover's onboard computer. Once that was complete, she went over all the code again, making sure there was nothing out of place, and ran a diagnostic making sure the rover was communicating with the booster like she had designed it to. "Are you sure you don't want me to come out and help?" she asked, watching through the windshield, as Mark moved rocks to form a message for the MRO to take a picture of. "Yeah, I'm good," he assured her as he set another red rock in place. "What you're doing is important, I got this." It really wasn't too bad since they had made a pile of rocks as they were moving dirt in for the farm, so it wasn't as if he was searching all over Kingdom Come looking for enough rocks to write a single letter, let alone a whole message. "How big do you think the letters need to be?" he asked her opinion. Beth considered that for a moment. "It doesn't have to be the Great Wall of China and visible with the naked eye, but I figure it should be a fairly good size because it's not like the contrast is going to be great," she reasoned aloud. "But they are going to be inspecting the image pretty close when they get it, I'm sure, so you don't have to be absurd about it." "I dunno," she paused. "Like 3 meters. Works for me," he agreed easily, already moving the rocks he'd already placed to make the letters a little larger. After all, it wouldn't do them any good if they did all this work and their message wasn't legible from space. "Is that better?" he asked once he'd made the adjustment. Beth peered out the window, taking a look at Mark's handiwork. "Looks good from here," she let him know. Mark threw her a thumbs up before they both went back to their respective tasks. "Hey, do you think I should put a happy face or a frowny face at the end?" Mark asked a little while later, as he carefully constructed a capital T. And by careful, he was tossing rocks in the general direction and then kicking them into place with edge of his boot. "Excuse me?" Beth asked, looking up at him through the windshield, not sure if she had heard him correctly. "Happy face or frowny face?" he repeated while he continued to move rocks. "Which is the message we're trying to convey?" "Happy face, we're happy to be alive." "Frowny face, boo, it sucks we've been left behind on Mars." "What do you think?" "I think your millennialness is showing, and an emoticon is probably unnecessary altogether," she replied, amused. "It's not exactly a text message we're sending here." "It's kinda a text message," he replied, thinking about it. "Actually, I think it's more of a selfie." Beth countered. "Yeah, it's close enough to the hab, that even if we're inside, we'll technically be in the frame," he reasoned. "That was my thought too. So I'm thinking frowny face," Mark announced, going back to the beginning of the conversation. "If only because I don't think I could make a poop emoji and actually make it look like poop and not just a pile of rocks." A surprised laugh burst out of Beth's chest. "A poop emoji?" she asked incredulously. "Yeah, I think that is what would really convey the message I want to send about being left behind on Mars," he informed her. "The whole thing has been shitty. Both metaphorically and quite literally." Beth laughed again. He wasn't wrong. "Why don't you worry about making sure you have enough rocks to actually finish the message before you worry about making even more work for yourself?" she suggested. "Fair enough," he shrugged, both of them going back to focusing on their respective tasks. Mark was about 3/4 of the way done when he started running low on rocks, and since Beth was as prepared as she was going to be at this point, she climbed out of the rover to give him a hand gathering up the last of the rocks he would need. "It's funny how priorities changed," she mused as she walked towards him with a rock under each arm. "How so?" he asked curiously, gesturing to where she should drop her delivery. "Well, when we were taking geological samples for Commander Lewis, we were so careful about documenting where each little bit of dirt and rock came from," she explained. "We were precise down to the millimeter, taking the utmost care not to cross-contaminate samples." Could you even imagine what the commander would say if she saw us making an unorganized pile of rocks from 200-meter radius, with no consideration of their geological implications? I can see the exact look on her face that she would have, he without hesitation. "The one she gives you that makes you feel all of about 2 inches tall." Beth groaned at the very thought. "I hate that look. It makes me want to start confessing to crimes I didn't commit. Like, yes, I drank the last of the coffee and didn't refill the pot. I'm sorry. I'm the one that froze all of Martinez's underwear. And Jack the Ripper, that was me too. Oh, and the Bermuda Triangle, that's my bad." Mark laughed so hard he had to drop the rock he was carrying to hold his side. "Oh God, stop," he pleaded through his laughter. Martinez's underwear, was that really you? What? Beth asked, looking up from where she was placing a rock in formation. Oh, yeah, that was me. To this day he's convinced it was me, he told her. There was nothing I could say to convince him that I was innocent, despite the fact that I actually didn't do it. I know, she replied, the devious smirk on her face telling him all he needed to know about that. It had begun a prank war that had lasted all the way to Mars. Well played, Johansson, well played, he commended. Now let's finish this up and get back inside. It's going to be a late night, we should probably try to get a nap in beforehand. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX since neither of them had actually gotten that nap that they had intended to take, the two astronauts were calling it late. The MRO would be directly overhead in exactly 8 minutes and sunrise was exactly 42 minutes after that. Despite the fact that they could easily determine each time the MRO's orbit would cause the satellite would cross their path with a little basic math, they'd decided to make their attempt on the last orbit before sunrise so that they could get the visual confirmation of its arrival as well. While technically unnecessary, there were enough variables that could ruin their plans. Eliminating one made them both feel better. "Are you ready in there?" Mark asked from where he was standing next to the booster, already scanning the horizon, waiting for the MRO's approach. "Ready as I'll ever be," Beth replied, sitting at the computer in Rover 1, the program she'd built up and running, waiting for her first command. "Okay, I see it." Mark called from his position. "It should be in range any time now." Beth tensed, her game face on as she sat on the literal edge of her seat, her fingers poised above the keyboard, her eyes glued to the screen waiting for the ping back from the satellite that would tell her the signal booster connected and she was in range. She got the ping and her fingers started flying, but she only got 3 commands in before she lost the signal for just a second, but it was enough that she had to start over. The second time she'd barely typed out the first command before she had to start again. The third time she thought she had it, but once more she lost communication with the satellite. She could hear Mark's voice in her ear, keeping her apprised of the satellite's position in the sky, relative to their location, but she funneled it to the back of her mind as she focused on the task in front of her. She tried once more, but she lost signal yet again as the MRO started moving away from them and was soon out of range once again. "God damn it. Motherfucker. Son of a goat-licking whore," Beth shouted, slapping the console of the rover with open palms. "I'm going to take that to mean it didn't work." Mark's voice sounded dryly over the comm. "You think?" Beth snapped angrily. She took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. "Sorry," she apologized for her anger, not meaning to direct it at him. "It's fine," he assured her quickly, not taking it personally. "Hold on a second, I'm coming inside." It only took a moment before the airlock in the rover cycled and he came inside to sit next to her. She was still taking deep steadying breaths as he took his helmet off, so he gave her a few minutes before he spoke. "So what happened?" he asked once she made eye contact. "The signal just isn't strong enough. It's reaching the MRO, but it keeps flickering in and out," she explained. "I need to communicate long enough to give me time to hack the satellite so that it will accept the new code, and then long enough to upload the packet. Once it's uploaded, the patch will auto-execute. I just need a solid couple of fucking minutes," she said, her frustration levels rising again. "Is it even worth trying again when the MRO completes orbit and circles around again?" Mark asked sincerely. "No," Beth threw up her hands irritably. "Without a reliable connection it's pointless." "Okay, so then we have," he looked down at the readout on his arm for the time, 96 minutes to figure out how to boost the signal," Mark said calmly. "And how do you plan to do that?" Beth asked brusquely. She blinked a couple times as she replayed her own statement in her head. "I didn't mean that to sound as sarcastic as it came out," she said with a wry sort of self-deprecating smirk. "I honestly want to know." Mark chuckled lowly. He didn't begrudge Beth her frustrations. She had poured all of her energies into this project for the last week, and she was so close. Like she could brush it with her fingertips, but just couldn't grab on. "I don't know yet," he told her honestly. "But I was checking out the booster while I was watching for the MRO, and there might be something, but I'll have to take a closer look." He started putting his helmet back on. "Suit back up, let's go take a look." Beth put her gloves and helmet back on and followed Mark into the tiny rover airlock. It was a tight squeeze with both of them in there at once, despite the fact that it was technically made for 2 people to be able to use at a time. Luckily it didn't take as long to cycle as the hab airlock did, so the lack of personal space wasn't terrible. Once back outside, the pair circled the rover until they made it back to the booster that was currently mounted on was used to be one of the weather station stakes. Using the flashlight he'd been carrying, Mark took another good look at the booster, with new intent. Beth had done a good job building it, she'd done everything right, that couldn't be denied. She may be a software designer by trade, but she certainly knew her way around the hardware as well. But as his eyes traced all the individual components, an idea began to form. "I think I can do it," Mark finally said. "I can give you the extra power you need by bypassing the circuit breaker here," he continued, pointing out what he was talking about. "If you do that, the amount of amperage it'll pull will eventually fry the whole booster," Beth countered, following his plan. "Yes, it will," Mark agreed, "that's why you didn't build it that way originally. But before it fries, I think you would get the boost you need to talk to the MRO. But you're only going to get the one chance. How long do you think it would last before it shorts out, and what percentage of success do you give the booster actually being strong enough to connect?" she asked before considering the new plan. "I give it maybe a 70% chance of it actually working, and anywhere from 90 to 180 seconds before it shorts out completely," he said honestly. "Those aren't great odds, and a minute and a half is a very different scenario than 3 minutes," Beth sighed. "I wish I could give you a surer answer," Mark shrugged. "But I'm a mechanical engineer, not an electrical one." "I know," Beth said absently, already running multiple scenarios in her head. "If this doesn't work, we won't get another shot at it. We don't have enough spare parts left over to make a second one." "I know the odds aren't ideal, but I think they're the best we're going to get," Mark replied. "Could you do it in a minute and a half if that's all you got?" Beth exhaled heavily as she considered it seriously. If she wasn't comfortable with this, they could postpone their attempt another day or two while they attempted to figure out a different way to boost the signal. There wouldn't be any shame in that. It would be better to wait than to destroy what could possibly be their only chance to let NASA and all of Earth know that they were still alive. "I can do it," she said firmly. Mark clapped his hands together. "I knew you could. All right, let's do this. I need my toolbox." "Where is it?" Beth asked. "I left it in the airlock." "I'll grab it for you," she offered, already heading in that direction. It didn't take her long to retrieve Mark's tools and was back at his side in a matter of moments, handing him tools as he needed them and holding the flashlight so he could see what he was doing. It would have been easier to take the booster inside to make the adjustments in the hab, but they didn't want to spend the time it would take to so. Instead they just disconnected the booster from the power supply so he didn't electrocute himself and worked on it where it stood. "Hey, Watney," Beth called, trying to get his attention. "I'm almost done," he said, still focusing on what he was doing. "No, Mark, look," she said, pointing to the eastern sky. He looked up and immediately saw what she was talking about. The sun was rising over the horizon. "Oh," he said softly. They stood quietly shoulder to shoulder, the first humans to ever personally watch the sun rise from another planet. The majority of the lightening sky was a pinkish red, but right around the direct vicinity of the sun, the sky was blue. It was the opposite of what it was on Earth, and an unfamiliar sight on Mars, as the daytime sky was a butterscotch color. Eventually, Mark saw movement from the corner of his eye. Glancing over at Beth, he saw a fist extended in his direction. "First," she said when she saw she had his attention. "Boom," he replied, bumping his fist against hers. They watched the sun rise for a little while longer before they turned back to the task at hand. Before long they were done and they were back in their original positions as they waited for the MRO to complete its orbit. Beth, inside the rover, poised and ready at the computer, and Mark standing next to the booster. Except this time his job wasn't to spot the satellite's approach, since they wouldn't be able to see it in the brightening sky, but to reconnect the booster to its power supply once the MRO was in range. Once he did, Beth would only have a matter of minutes to complete her work before the whole thing fried. "Are you ready, Watney?" Beth asked as she watched the time tick second by second. 2 minutes and 30 seconds till go. "Ready and waiting," he replied, poised and prepared to act. "Just give me the word." 2 minutes. 90 seconds. 1 minute. 45 seconds. 30. 15. 10 seconds. Go. Mark did his job, and as soon as she received confirmation that she was connected to the orbiter, her fingers started flying. Reflecting on it later, it would all be a blur. Her fingers knew what to do without her having to think about it, and before she knew it she was slamming the enter key with more force than necessary, sending the patch up to the MRO. Her heart was in her throat as she watched the upload status bar tick towards complete. It stalled at 96% and Beth had to keep herself from screaming at the screen. And just when it started to move again, there was a popping sound and everything electronic in the rover went black. Johansson. Mark called questioningly over the comms when Beth didn't immediately give a status report. Yeah, hold on, I'm coming out, Beth replied, already moving towards the door. Did it work? He asked anxiously, waiting next to the rover's wheel, ready to give her a hand down. I think so, she told him honestly. It was just about complete, but I didn't get to actually see the upload hit 100% before it cut out. The booster held on for almost 2 minutes before it short out, Mark mentioned. You did a good job, Beth commended. It didn't cut out once this time. You did all the hard work, Mark insisted. I just plugged it in. Beth just hummed noncommittally. Do you think it worked? She asked, looking in the direction the MRO went in, despite the fact they couldn't see it now that the sun had risen. Oh yeah, he said instantly. You're Beth Johansson, nerd extraordinaire, of course it did. NASA's probably already wondering what the fuck just happened. Definitely, Beth said with a half-hearted smile. I'm sure it worked. Neither of them sounded overly convinced. They stood there for another minute until Mark's yawn broke the silence. I am so fucking tired, he sighed. I'm actually still okay, she shrugged, a natural night owl. Before joining NASA, all-nighters were a regular occurrence in her life. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm going inside and going to bed. Beth was all keyed up from her work and knew she wouldn't be finding sleep anytime soon, but she also knew if she didn't want her sleep schedule to completely flip that she needed to try to nap for at least a couple hours. Hey Johansson, Mark said as they made the short trek to the hab. What's up, Watney? Happy Thanksgiving, Beth, he said, throwing an arm over her shoulders. Thanksgiving was yesterday, she pointed out. We haven't been to bed yet, so it still counts, he insisted. She looped an arm around his back, completing the side hug. Happy Thanksgiving, Mark. They broke apart as they stepped into the airlock, both of them desperately hoping they had something to be truly thankful about. SATCOM, Johnson Space Center. Houston, Texas. Mindy Park slid into her seat at her station, to-go mug of coffee in hand, ready for another routine night. It was Thanksgiving, so the already light overnight crew was even more sparse than usual with the holiday, so she expected a quiet 8 hours ahead of her. But she had barely settled, before an alert sounded, making everyone in the room take notice. We've lost communication with the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, one of her fellow techs announced as he pulled up the pertinent information. Is it a glitch on our end or the orbiter? Her boss asked the room at large. I'm looking into it right now. Well, the satellite is on year 30 of its 2-year mission, so it might just be its time. Sir, MRO just came back online, Mindy announced as the orbiter's status went green, swiveling in her chair to face her boss. He looked over at Mindy. Park, keep looking into what happened and keep an eye on it tonight, see if happens again. He pulled on his jacket and picked up his briefcase. I'm going home, but I want an email update in my inbox before you leave in the morning. Yes sir, she said, pushing her glasses up her nose. Mindy went back to her normal work, putting the MRO's glitch on the back burner for now until she noticed the first irregularity. She was sorting through incoming imagery and forwarding them to their correct recipients when she noticed that the MRO did not take pictures of the North Pole like it was scheduled to. Assuming that when they lost communication with the orbiter it reset its directives, she went to correct them, but before she could even pull up the program, a series of images from the orbiter started coming through. At first she thought that maybe there was just a transmission delay, but as the images started displaying it was clear that it wasn't the pole. Looking up the longitude and latitude of the images she gasped. 31.2 degree N, 28.5 degree W. That was Acidolia Planitia. The site of the Ars 3 mission. Oh. She mumbled to herself. There had been a memo after the AS-3 mission was scrubbed from way up the food chain that there was to be no satellite images taken of the site until further notice, so she did not want to have to be the one to tell her boss that the orbiter had gone rouge and went directly against orders. She knew she could call her boss right away, never mind waiting to send him a status email for him to find in the morning, but the same part of her that couldn't help but slow down and rubberneck at traffic accidents had her scouring the images looking for any sign of the two lost astronauts. The first image had nothing, just the relatively flat landscape of the Martian plains. The second showed what was left of the MAV base. It was in the third where she found the sign she was looking for, but not the kind she had expected. "What the fuck?" she whispered passionately. She enhanced the image as much as she could, making it as clear as possible. That was technically someone else's job, but she wasn't wait around for someone else to do it. As the image sharpened, the message didn't change, not that she expected it to, but there was no denying what it said, staring at her in high-definition color. Forget calling her boss, she needed to go jump straight to the top of the hierarchy. She picked up the phone on her desk. "Yes, hi. This is Mindy Park from SATCOM. I need the emergency contact number for Dr. Venkat Kapoor." "Yes, it's an emergency.